In this video, we're going to be adding in some vegetation. So one of the things that we can do is we can create a new layer that's going to be dedicated to just the vegetation. So let's create another grid object. So go to right-click your grid, 2D object, select tile map, and let's call this vegetation layer. Vegetation underscore tile map. Okay, once we have that created, we'll go ahead and we'll select our vegetation layer in our palette. And once we have that selected, we need to change our active tile map. We want to paint these on the vegetation. Now the vegetation is going to be equivalent to the ground layer, so we can set vegetation order and layer to 2. If you want the vegetation to be in front and for the player to move behind the vegetation, you would set this to 3. But for this purposes, I'm okay with it being on the same one. So let's go ahead and take some grass. We're just going to use our paint tool, select a grass sprite or plant sprite, and you're simply going to just paint it along, just like this. And if you accidentally scribble it on some of your other assets, it's okay. The easiest solution here is to go into Focus, Tile Map, and then here we can simply take the Erase tool and we can erase elements just on this active layer. Really handy. Go back to None, and here we go. We have our grass. Now, the reason why it's beneficial to put this on its own layer is you'll notice here that our grass is sort of above the ground if you zoom in. So one thing we can actually do is we could take this entire layer and we can just move it down on the Y. You can see here, we can get as close to the ground as we want. So let's do like -0.1. And there you go. So if we want, we can add some plants in here. Grab your paintbrush, and we can put a plant there. All right, so you don't have to go crazy with the vegetation, but it is nice to be able to add some sort of vegetation. And I think I'm happy with honestly just one. Another thing that I would like to add here is we have in our sprites folder, we have foreground elements such as some rocks and barrels and some lights. I would also like to go ahead and place some of these. So let's create another palette for our foreground elements. So we're going to create a new palette. Let's call this Foreground. Foreground items. Create. We're going to go into our sprites, our tile maps. We're going to create a new palette. So select that folder. It will save out the asset palette for that. From there, we need to slice the foreground elements. So these are going to be a 256 sprite. So make sure your sprite mode is multiple, 256 per unit. Open up the sprite editor, slice, grid by cell size, 256 by 256. When you're ready, hit slice and apply. Once that's done, X out and drag this into your palette. It's going to then convert those sprites to tile assets. So go ahead into your tiles, create a new folder to save those tile assets, and we'll call this foreground items. All right, let's go ahead and select folder. And one thing we can do here is we can create another tile map layer for the foregrounds, or we can actually just rename our vegetation tile map to our foreground tile map. So here we have foreground tile map. And as we change the name there, the active tile map also gets changed. So now we have our foreground items, and we can simply take a few rocks and we can go ahead and place them wherever we'd like. So one thing I think I would like to do is I'm going to place 3 rocks there. I'm going to put some vegetation in between it. Take this, just like that. And another thing we can do is we can actually go to our foreground items. And we have barrels, we have, a little cave here. Maybe this is going to be how you're going to win. We could paint in, this is our exit to win. So we'll go ahead and put that in the corner there. And for this course, in order to participate, all you need is a walkable surface. As long as we have a walkable surface, you are able to follow along with this course. If you'd like, you're more than welcome to build out this level extensively as you want, but for the bare bones, we just need a simple level like this. So once you're ready, you can go ahead and make sure you save your scene frequently. And before we head out of here, let's go ahead and add those spikes we talked about earlier. So we may need to add we're going to add some sprites to our foreground items. So instead of creating another palette dedicated to those spikes, we can actually just add them to our foreground items. So if we look into our environment folder here, we have some sprites, and one of those sprites is the level sprites, and they have these spikes here that I want to use. So what we can do is we need to slice this. So it's a 128 by 128 sprite. So go to multiple, pixels per unit is 128, open up your sprite editor, slice them. Once you've done that, hit apply, close this, and now we can drag the sprites in. But with these sprites, and actually, I'm sorry, 128 was not correct. You can see here that they were sliced at 256, so I need to redo that. Go into your sprite editor, slice, and they need to be 128 by 128. There we go. Hit apply. And I don't want all of these sprites. I actually just want this, the spikes. So I'm going to find that, which is this one here. It's the sprite 5. And I'm just going to drag that individual one into here. It's going to save out that sprite as a tile asset. So I'm going to open up my tiles. I'm going to go to my foreground items and save it in there. And here is my sprite. So now I can go ahead and take this with my paintbrush, and I can actually paint it in here. So we're going to go ahead and just paint 2 of them right here. So if the player were to fall down, he's basically going to go ahead and hit those spikes. And we may even add a waterfall within here too. Okay, in the next video, we are going to get into animated sprites. I'll see you then.